Getting some old beams, and then I'll remill them. This is old vertical grain fir I'll get out of it, and then that'll be all the trim work for the house. That's what I'm doing today. I got the logs home. Pick these up and take them to the mill. This is an old beam. By the size of it, it probably would have been a part of a bridge, maybe a railroad bridge. But with these nails in there, gosh, I don't know, probably maybe a building. But these rusted nails, which have probably been in here for 100 years anyway, by the look of this beam, it's probably a beam that was cut maybe 150 years ago, during the generation of the very first time logs from around here were ever being cut. So this is old growth. A tree like this was probably, could have been 5 feet across, and they were turning into beams like this, getting a whole bunch of beams out of this. And trees like this that are that big are pretty much non-existent today. Or if they are that big, hopefully they're protected. But way back when, this entire area was just timber upon timber, and there was so much of it around that people didn't even know what to do with all the wood. So they were just making enormous beams like this. Now a beam this size would be made out of glued up 2x6s, 1x12s, whatever it would take, chipboard, to be able to get the mass and the strength of just one of these beams. So yeah, they don't make stuff like this anymore, and I'll show you more about why I think this is magic. But with these nails, they've got to go, because just one little nick with one of these nails against the blade there is going to screw up the blade, and it won't ever cut straight. So yeah, 100-year-old nail with 100 years of rust. Okay, one down, a few more to go from what I can see. I think I got pretty much all the nails, but since this is an old beam, it's been dragged around. You want to make sure that there's no rocks embedded in any of this wood. These holes that are just part of the history, you want to see if there's any rocks or black widows in there. Get all that stuff out. The rocks are what'll dull the blade. There's another nail, there's another nail, a bunch of stuff's on the bottom. So this side's done. This is a PV. One of my favorite tools around. I would say this beam probably weighs 300 pounds. But this is a tool that makes it a lot easier. All right, correction. As I'm moving this thing around, I'd say it's probably well over 500 pounds. But it looks like relatively nail free. I have a couple right there I'll pull out, but the nice thing about nails, what makes them good, is, well, I'll show you later, since they've been rusted in there for so many years, they'll actually stain the wood, and you'll have these big blue spots and blue streaks, which gives a lot of character to the wood that I'm trying to mill. And it's like again, it just shows, it kind of celebrates the history of where this beam is from. And so I'm giving this beam a whole nother life, making the very most out of a tree that was once living in a big forest, minding its own business, and then it got cut down. But like I said, let's celebrate what this wood has to give us for as long as we can. And I'll put it in the house, and I'll live with it for as long as I'm around anyway. Checking the sides here. All this stuff right here is actually ash from Mount St. Helens. And I remember Mount St. Helens when it went off, 1980. So what is that? 43 years ago. Ash does no favors to the sharpness of a blade either, but I can't do everything about it. But again, I'm just kind of looking over the surface, looking for any rocks, any more nails that I might have missed. Now that I have this log on the mill like I want it, these clamps over here, they come up. Putting these on, clamping them down. Here's another one. And what that does is it clamps this beam or log into place. So then when the power of the blade is going through the wood, it doesn't accidentally rotate this piece of wood, which would crimp the blade, and then I'd have to get another new blade. I'm ready to start milling. On this older mill that I have, how I adjust the height of this blade, this bandsaw essentially, how I adjust that to the height that I need. So I'm gonna start slabbing this into a whole bunch of boards. What I'm shooting for, because I'm gonna make this for all my window trim and the trim of my house, most of it's probably gonna be about 3/4 of an inch thick. I will mill it a little bit more than that because there is this blade waffles just a little bit. But then I'll get that rough cut, and then I'll take it to the tools that I have in the barn, and then I'll put a finishing dimension to it, which will be hopefully exactly 3/4 of an inch. So right now, this adjusts the height, and I'm gonna go down just a little bit. You can see how this kind of raises and lowers it. And I'm gonna give myself, I've been doing this for a while, so I know some of the tricks, and I've learned a lot of this stuff the hard way, is in case I did miss any nails that are going this way, I'll give myself a little bit of a depth to be able to miss some nails, and then I'll get a clean cut through, and then I can use that leftover and keep slabbing that up a little bit later. But I'm at the depth of where I want to be. Okay. Got our first cut. All right, no nails. And by the looks of it, this beam has a lot of potential. As I dig deeper into it, my grain tightness is gonna increase, and it's gonna get pure 100% vertical grain fur, old growth. Oh, this is gonna be good. what I do love so much about milling is you just always want to see what's inside of a beam, what's inside of a big old log. This has some secrets. This darker wood here, so this is red fir, and this darker wood is pitch wood. So inside of this, during this tree's life, it had it may have had a disease or something like that, and it coped with that disease by having a whole bunch of resin and sap inside that wood. It's very hard wood, it doesn't decay. It creates havoc on the blades sometimes because of the pitch buildup on the blades, but still it's kind of cool. Whether I use that in my millwork or not, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, every log has a secret. I have milled through lead, which is where at some point in that tree's life people were shooting it with bullets, and the bullets went way inside, and fortunately it's lead, it's not too hard, so it doesn't do too much damage to the blades. But yeah, having a big bullet in a log is not uncommon. You can see all those logs over there. Those are all logs that I'm gonna mill at some point. Some of them are oak, maple, black walnut. I have some black locust. This is black locust here. I love to mill black locust because black locust does not rot. It was brought over, it's not from the United States, but it was brought over as for utilitarian purposes. Because it's so rot resistant, there was you could get into different catalogs and stuff and buy young locust trees to be able to plant on your farmstead. And where I live out here, you see these old legacy locust trees, but they were planted originally for farmers to be able to use for fence posts. And one of their slogans as they were marketing black locust to be grown in the United States, they said, the difference between an iron post and a black locust post is a black locust post lasts 1 day less than an iron post. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But anyways, this is a log in waiting to be turned into decking for my outside of my decking. Yeah, black walnut for tabletops, furniture, fir for more structural stuff, elm for doors. Yeah, I have a plan for all that wood, believe it or not. So I've got a lot of milling to do. But over here, I've got some of these boards, and let's just take one of these boards. I'll have to put the finishing touches on all these, but this is a good candidate for right now. I'll show you what still lives inside. When you're turning rough sawn lumber into a finished product, another stage is you want to get one edge that you can work with. So with the joiner, this is a jet joiner planer combo. It's a great tool I picked up. I use the crap out of it, but I have a nice finish edge that I can work with. So with this finished edge, I can run this edge against the fence of my table saw here, and then rip this board to whatever width I choose. And then also with this tool, I can take this rough surface and turn smooth, which is what I'm gonna do right now. Here, you can see how that is nice and shiny. It's been planed once, and this is the rough side, so you can see what that machine does. And what I'm after, since this is fir, you see that beautiful red color, and here's some other pieces of red fir that I have milled. I've been a milling machine for the last couple days, but look at that gorgeous stuff. See how tight that grain is. So this is called vertical grain, not a lot of knots. It's because this stuff is from trees that were very, very giant. You can compare that to this This is just a modern day 2x4 that you would get at a hardware store. And you can see how big and wide those growth rings are. So this was from a very fast growing tree, a young tree. More than likely this tree only had a chance to grow about this big, for anywhere from about there to there, until it was turned into 2x4s. And if they were lucky, they may have gotten a couple 2x6s out of it. But since the growth rings are not very tight, the wood is a lot more unstable. It twists a lot more. It's not nearly as strong as this old stuff, which is old growth. You can see how tight those grains are. So each one of those little lines was how fast that tree grew in a year. And a lot of these boards, well, I have some boards upstairs that I've already milled, I'll show you, but they're as tight as about the pages of a book. So at that time, in a square inch, it took that tree about well over 100 years to grow that thick. So as a tree grows older, it starts growing slower, but then you get these tighter grains, better quality wood. The kind of wood that really tells a story to me. It's a part of history. I mean, every single tree that's out there, I think, is more beautiful as a living tree as opposed to this. But if a tree's got to come down, this is the best way to celebrate it. With these extra stages, you know, like I said, I'd rip these boards down to the dimensions that I want, thick, thin, thinner. And I'm using this for all the trim work upstairs. So let's go upstairs and then I'll show you what a beam looks like when it's turned into the stuff that's upstairs. Come on. Down here is some of the woodwork that I've started. When I was talking about red fir, when it's really old, the older it gets, it starts to oxidize in the air, or reacts with the air, and it turns more and more red, more and more deep and beautiful. This is red fir when it's very old. I put a clear finish on it, but this is very old. This is not the kind of timber that was out there, but this is stuff that was really used. It was used up in the roof of a barn. And so all these little black marks, remember when I was saying when those nails rust, they make little dark black or blue stains in that. It's just beautiful wood. I love the old worn look, but you can see how potentially deep and red that red fir or Douglas fir can get. Here's some of the stuff in the sunlight. So I've had this up for a year or so. The more recent stuff that doesn't have a finish on it yet, we'll go upstairs. As you can see, once you get up here, here is the kitchen. And here's some of that wood that I milled actually from that beam. So here, look at those nail holes. Some people, that's not their thing, but for me, I love it. These little blue streaks there. There's some nice ones right there. But here, if you get a close-up, you can just see how tight those rings are. And once I put a finish on this, it'll be nice and dark and deep red. And for the years to come, it'll just keep getting richer and richer. But yeah, so this set of windows in the kitchen is getting done. Just those growth rings, that's the sort of stuff that I'm after. You can't buy this stuff in stores. You got to work for it, and you got to know how to get it. And I guess part of this whole thing about building this whole barn is, well, pretty much I know where every single board came from. Every single one has a story. I guess that's my shtick. It's the thing that turns me on, is I know where that door came from. I know it came out of an old theater. I got that one out of Goodwill. So much of this stuff is reclaimed, recycled. Part of the thing is that I know that I live in a world, and I'm aware that we're consumers and we waste a lot. And as consumers, a lot of us are trained to keep buying things, and we don't know where it comes from. We don't know where our meat comes from. We don't know where our produce comes from. We don't know where our clothes come from. And when we go to the store, we certainly don't know where our 2x4s come from, aside from that one store down the road. But the way I'm living here is that I know where all of this wood came from, and I love that. And it goes anywhere from the trim work to the floor to the wood that I use for all the lights in here. So this whole place over here, as you can see, it's a barn. And I have a lot of space, but Again, you know, this barn was built in the 1890s. It was destined to be burned down, and before it got burned down, it took me a year to take it down. But the people that built this barn originally knew where all this wood came from as well, and it was probably brought in on a wagon train with either ox or horses, and I just love that. And rather than having this be a big giant bonfire, I'm turning it into my house. So yeah, took me a year to take this barn down. I moved it about an hour away to this location where I live right now. It used to just be nothing but a farmer's field, and now it's got a couple buildings on it. They were all made out of reclaimed stuff. All these windows, they're all different sizes. They all come from different places, but I didn't buy anything new. These round windows, this one right up here, and those ones, they came out of an old restaurant that was being torn down. Anyways, I tend to do things the hard way, but I like it that way because even though this is a lot of work, I love the kind of work that I get to do.